Have you ever wondered what can affect a person's life to such an extent that their destiny becomes a chain of tragedies, inner conflicts, and brilliant insights? The story of Vincent Van Gogh is not just a story about a great artist, but a profound journey into the world of a lonely man who felt like an outsider from childhood. Vincent was the second child in the family, but the first, his older brother, died before he had even lived a year. It happened exactly a year before the birth of our hero. Parents did not change the name, so Vincent all his life carried the name of his deceased brother. Can you imagine what a strange feeling this must have been for the child? It was as if he lived with the feeling that his life was a second try, as if he was replacing someone else. Such a start may have influenced his further soul-searching and suffering. Van Gogh's childhood was not a happy one. He was born on March 30th, 1853, in a small village in the Netherlands. His father was a pastor and his mother was an amateur artist, but family life did not bring him much joy. Vincent was not the easiest child. He was withdrawn and moody, often withdrawn into himself. Studying was also not given to him. At 15, he dropped out of school because he couldn't stand the strict rules and constant demands. Despite this, he always felt a deep connection with art and nature, drew a lot, although at that time he did not think about painting as his destiny. However, his early life did not go in the direction of art, but in trying to find himself. One of Vincent's first occupations was in religion. As a young man, he decided to become a preacher. Perhaps he was trying to find his way in a world that seemed full of suffering and injustice. Vincent went to work among poor miners in Belgium. He didn't just preach, he literally lived with them, sharing their needs. Van Gogh gave the miners his clothes, food, and even his last money. And in the end, he was left with nothing. He was so committed to his mission that the church leadership considered him too eccentric and suspended him from preaching. For Vincent, this was a serious blow that finally shattered his faith in religion as a way to save people. Even then, it was already evident that Van Gogh differed from others in his extreme actions. He did not know how to be in moderation, always going to the limit, even if it entailed disasters. This character will be manifested in his artistic life, when he will create his paintings with the same passion that he gave his things to the miners. Interestingly, despite his efforts and desire to help people, his family did not understand Vincent. He was strange to them. His father wanted his son to become a respected man, but his mother never appreciated his artistic talent. Van Gogh lived with the feeling that no one needed him, and this feeling of loneliness haunted him for the rest of his life. But it was this deep loneliness and inner suffering that would soon become the source of his amazing artistic vision. The man who lost everything in his attempt to be a preacher ended up being the one who, through his paintings, preached not words, but emotions and colors. Think about it. Van Gogh went from complete ruin in the mining villages to worldwide fame as one of the most influential artists in history. But how did he come to art? What made him pick up a paintbrush when it seemed like all doors were closed before him? The beginning of his artistic journey. Van Gogh began to seriously engage in painting when he was already 27 years old. Before that, he was looking for himself for a long time. He worked as a seller of paintings, a teacher, a preacher. When all these attempts were unsuccessful, he turned to art as the last hope to express himself. Van Gogh never studied at the academy, so at first his work was far from ideal. They were gloomy and crude, often depicting the lives of poor people. His first major painting was The Potato Eaters, which was so dark and heavy that neither critics nor ordinary people understood it. Van Gogh wanted to show the real life of ordinary people, but his approach seemed too depressing to people. For Vincent, however, it was just a start. He began to work with great energy. In his short artistic career, only about 10 years, he painted about 900 paintings. That's almost one painting every 3 days. But despite such hard work, hardly anyone bought his work. In his entire life, he sold only one painting, Red Vineyards in Arles, and that for a small amount of money. Most people simply did not understand his unique style. Van Gogh used bright, saturated colors and broad brushstrokes that looked rough and unusual for the time. Back then, art was valued for its accuracy and realism, and his work seemed strange to people. Nevertheless, Vincent continued to paint. Van Gogh was a man who always dreamed of more than just painting. He wanted to create something more, not only for himself, but for all artists. Vincent dreamed of an artists' commune, some ideal place where creative people could live and work together, helping and inspiring each other. This idea was born when he moved to the south of France, to the small town of Arles. There, he found the house that would later become known as the Yellow House. Van Gogh envisioned this house to be the center of his art utopia, where artists would be free to create, share ideas, and work in harmony. Van Gogh invited his friend, the painter Paul Gauguin, to create together, and he was sure that his friend would be a major contributor to this project. Gauguin at the time was already a fairly well-known painter with his own style. Van Gogh admired his work and considered him his creative ally. Van Gogh invited Gauguin to his home in Arles, suggesting that he become part of the artists' commune. Paul agreed and moved in with Vincent. However, their life together was far from their dreams. Both artists were very different in character and views on art. Van Gogh was an emotional and passionate man who painted with great energy, putting his feelings into each picture. Gauguin, on the other hand, was more rational and cold-blooded. He believed that art should convey ideas and symbolism, not just express emotions. These differences in their approaches to creativity quickly led to tension between the two. Conflicts began to escalate. Gauguin felt that Van Gogh was too eccentric and emotional, and Van Gogh, in turn, began to suspect that Gauguin was about to leave him. They often argued and quarreled, and one day there was a decisive quarrel. No one knows exactly what caused this conflict, but it is known that Gauguin declared his intention to leave. This was a real blow for Van Gogh. He did not want to lose his friend and see the failure of his dream of the artists' commune. After this quarrel, Van Gogh fell into a state of deep mental crisis. In a fit of despair, he cut off his left ear, perhaps a gesture in a desperate attempt to hold on to Gauguin and preserve their friendship. There is a theory that in this way Van Gogh wanted to show how important to him this union. Van Gogh then voluntarily went to a psychiatric hospital in Saint-Rémy. There, despite his serious condition, he continued to paint. His most famous painting, Starry Night, was painted in the walls of this hospital. The painting reflects his inner world. The raging colors and spiraling stars symbolize his unstable state. When you look at it, it seems that nature itself vibrates and pulsates, as if reflecting his pain and suffering. It is interesting that at the time of writing Starry Night, Van Gogh was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But instead of giving up creativity, he continued to paint, literally spilling his emotions onto the canvas. One could say that it was his mental state that pushed him to create these masterpieces. Mental health problems haunted Van Gogh throughout his life. Today, many experts suggest that he suffered from bipolar disorder or epilepsy, which explains his sudden mood swings and emotional outbursts. There were days when he was full of energy and could work for 12 to 15 hours, creating several paintings in a week. But then came periods of deep depression, when he literally could not get out of bed and everything seemed meaningless to him. Interestingly, it was in such moments of internal struggle that his creativity reached new heights. Perhaps his paintings became such a powerful expression of feelings because he lived on the edge between reality and his own fantasies. Van Gogh was not afraid to show his weaknesses through art, which made his work so moving and real. Perhaps it was his unstable state that allowed him to see the world differently. Brighter, deeper, more emotional. Van Gogh saw beauty where others did not. Another interesting point. Van Gogh, despite all his problems, never lost interest in life. Even in his darkest moments, he found the strength to create. And although his paintings are often filled with suffering, they also convey hope and light. He didn't paint to become great, but because he couldn't do otherwise. But what was it that made Van Gogh continue to paint despite all his failures? At some point, he realized that he was painting not for recognition, but to express his emotions. He used to say, "I don't paint to sell my paintings, but to say what I can't put into words." His art became a way for him to cope with his inner feelings, and even if the world did not understand him, he continued to create. Van Gogh found in art not so much a way to live as a way to survive. He used paint and brush as a tool of self-therapy. His art became his escape from the darkness that surrounded him. Although his contemporaries did not appreciate his work, his inner fire never diminished. He was confident that one day people would understand his art, and as we know, he was right. But even with all this suffering and perseverance, Van Gogh was not destined to see recognition in his lifetime. He had to push himself to the limit, not only in his art, but also in his own life. His final years and tragic end. In a psychiatric hospital in Saint-Rémy, Van Gogh was diagnosed with a mental disorder, and although his condition periodically improved, the attacks still continued to torment the artist. It was a very difficult period for him. While in hospital, Van Gogh often felt isolated from society, but it was there that he created some of his most famous paintings. But despite his masterpieces, Van Gogh received no recognition. This neglect, of course, took a heavy toll on his state of mind. Vincent wrote letters to his brother Theo, in which he often complained of loneliness and a feeling of being unwanted. Only Theo believed in his talent and supported him financially. But even this support could not save Van Gogh from deep depression. In 1890, Van Gogh left the hospital and moved to the village of Auvers-sur-Oise, near Paris. Here he hoped to begin a new chapter of his life. He continued to paint vigorously, creating one painting almost every day. But even with his new surroundings, his condition did not improve. Gradually, his thoughts became more and more gloomy, and his anxiety and depression attacks intensified. He felt less and less able to control his emotions and control his life. And so, on July 27, 1890, Van Gogh committed a tragic act. He took a revolver and shot himself in the chest. But surprisingly, he didn't die immediately. Despite being badly wounded, Van Gogh lived for 2 more days. All this time, he refused the help of doctors, as if he had already made his decision to leave. His brother Theo arrived at his side, and Vincent spent the last hours of his life by his side. It is said that his last words were, "The sorrow will last forever." This phrase, more than any other, captures the inner pain that Van Gogh felt throughout his life. In retrospect, it is hard to imagine that the man who created such vivid, vibrant paintings suffered from such deep, personal, dark emotions. But Van Gogh was a man of extremes. He lived between extreme inspiration and complete depression, between loving life and wanting to end it. And in the end, it was this torn between opposites that led him to his tragic denouement. Van Gogh, despite all his talent and passion for art, could not find his place in the world. His mental state did not allow him to survive the disappointment and loneliness. Van Gogh died not knowing that his paintings would one day become some of the most expensive and sought after in the world. This paradox is a tragedy not only of his life, but of many other great artists. But what happened to his works after his death? How did a man who sold just one painting in his lifetime become an iconic figure in the art world? Van Gogh's legacy. When Van Gogh died, he was only 37 years old and hardly anyone knew his work. The only exception was his brother Theo, who supported Vincent to the last, believing in his talent. But even Theo could not foresee the future of his brother's work. Immediately after Van Gogh's death, many of his paintings remained forgotten and dusted in a corner. At the end of the 19th century, the art world was focused on very different styles, and Vincent's work seemed too eccentric and unusual for most people. A turning point in the history of Van Gogh's legacy came thanks to his sister-in-law, Johanna Van Gogh Bonger, Theo's wife. After her husband's death, Johanna was left alone with a huge number of Van Gogh's paintings. Not only did she not give up this burden, but she did everything she could to make the world aware of Vincent. She began actively promoting his work, organizing exhibitions and publishing letters that Van Gogh wrote to Theo. Gradually, step by step, Vincent's name became better known. It took several decades before Van Gogh's paintings received the recognition they deserved. At the beginning of the 20th century, his works became a real sensation. Art critics and collectors began to see in his paintings not just strange strokes and bright colors, but deep emotions and a unique perception of the world. Van Gogh became a symbol of an artist who was not afraid to express his feelings through art, regardless of the opinions of others. Today, his paintings are worth a huge amount of money. For example, in 1990, his Portrait of Dr. Gachet was sold for a record $82 million. Modern museums are proud to have Van Gogh's works in their collections, and millions of people around the world are inspired by his unique style. Vincent's paintings are visited by thousands of people every year in museums around the world, and his work is discussed in exhibitions, books, and movies. But why has his legacy proved so significant? One key factor is his unique way of looking at the world. Van Gogh used color and texture like no one before him. The vivid strokes of his brushstrokes seem to bring a painting to life, conveying not just an image, but a mood and emotion. His paintings show his inner world, a world of pain, suffering, but at the same time love for nature and people. This combination of emotions and deep mental vulnerability touches the hearts of many people to this day. Interestingly, it is thanks to his tragic fate that Van Gogh became such a cult character. The story of a brilliant artist who lived in poverty and suffering but continued to create resonates with many. His life has become an example of how important it is to be true to your talent, even if the world around you doesn't understand. Van Gogh is an example that true art always finds its audience, even if it takes decades.